Today's episode of Wine Time Fridays is brought to you in part by our friends at Pilgrim's Market and CDA Gourmet.
It's been a long week, right? Are you ready to wind down? Why not? It's time for the Wine Time Fridays podcast with Shelley and Phil. Neither are sommeliers, but both have a deep passion for life, each other, and of course, delicious wine. And now, here to talk about this week over a glass of wine is Shelley and Phil. It's wine time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Wine Time Fridays on this Friday, May 9th, episode 264, second week of Oregon Wine Month. Shelley, happy Friday. It's wine time.
It is wine time.
It is.
And we're not even doing this because of Bells Up.
But
it's appropriate.
It's so appropriate because today we have with us Dave Specter of Bells Up Winery from Oregon. And we're going to, you are probably not going to, I am very, very confident in saying you're not going to find these wines on your store shelf or at your bottle shop or any place where you get fine wine unless that place is Bells Up Winery in Oregon.
Yeah. You have to go there.
Yes.
And make an appointment.
Exactly. They are open. They're always open by appointment is what I understand.
That's
Dave,
right. That's right.
Welcome.
When you're a small little place like ours, you pretty much have to be ready to meet folks and talk to folks, but we only want to take one group at a time when folks are here. So we want everything to be very small, very intimate, which means that you do have to kind of let us know when is a good time for you to come.
We'll be there tomorrow at noon. No. Dave, welcome to Wine Time Fridays. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. We are so happy that you all found us, and we can't wait to share what we're doing.
Well, part of these, the great thing about these wine months, and we have a friend that just despises wine days and wine months, and I'm like, you're a bottle shop, and you should probably endorse these things to get people in your doors to try new wines. Anyway, this is a way that we can feature wines from different regions that you typically may not even know about.
Absolutely.
So while I'm opening this, Shelley's going to let our pup in because the strategy to let her out just before recording, I'm not quite sure about. This is a 2024 Bells Up Winery Joy Seyval Blanc.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Seyval?
Seyval is how we normally pronounce it, but we're usually good with either.
Beautiful. And here we go. Okay. Oh, man, it's smoking.
Yeah, I always tell people when I'm opening this, when the pop is coming, it's usually a shock to them. So we usually say, incoming!
Incoming. Well, as our friend Sam Lang says, when you take the basket off, it is.
You are committed.
Loaded weapon. So our Wine Time Fridays listeners, we've been talking since December 31st this year when we had our friends over and Phil tried to saber an actual champagne, and after 7 tries didn't work. And so what was the one that the Sparkmans brought over?
It was a sentimental.
It
wasn't a champagne.
No.
It was a sparkling like Martini and Rossi or something.
That's what it was. Martini and Rossi. And so Nat says, do you mind if I try? I'm like, go for it. And it just one swipe, boom. And so all year I've been trying to find the top of that in our yard, garden, wherever. Don't know. I finally found it. Last week it was underneath the pine needles in the rose garden. And so all is perfect in the world. I'm going to try to do something fun with that bottle. As I said, we regressed. A 2024 Bells Up Winery Joy Seyval Blanc Brut, $48 at the winery. Mm-hmm. And this is a grape that I have no idea about. So let's do a Wine Time Fridays toast to health, wealth, and abundance, gratitude, romance, and
peace on earth.
Here's the clink.
Amen.
Oh, that's
It's not really festive.
no. For you watching on YouTube, check out this. I think we've had this one other time, but look at that flute that we're having this in. It is a stemless flute.
They're by Corksicle.
Corksicle, yeah, and they've got an inner glass, so your warmth. And by the way, my hands are really warm right now because it's a beautiful day, and it will keep the juice chilled.
Yeah.
So, cheers.
Cheers.
I already cheered.
Right now, I think we may have a problem. Well, I don't see Dave sipping wine.
Uh-oh. He's gonna talk that one.
Well, that's the life of a farmer. And when you're doing what we're doing, we have no employees. So I make the wine, I drive the tractor. So actually this evening, once we're through chatting here, I got to get back on the tractor and do a couple more hours. So, I'm good with not drinking and driving, and particularly when one is on a tractor.
Yeah, you don't want to roll that thing.
No.
You don't want to roll that thing. I'm going to do a quick timeout. I always forget the topic for that thing.
Oh, yeah.
You still have 9 acres, is it?
It's about 7 that are planted. We have about 8.5 that are available to plant. And things have changed, and I'm sure we'll get into this as we go along, but our whole plan as to how we were going to plant our vineyard has changed quite a bit since we started planting about 11 years ago. A lot of reasons for that, like say, which we can get into, but right now we've got about 1.5 acres that is unplanted on the property, and I suspect it will remain unplanted for a while.
Okay.
Do you rotate? Well, you're not really rotating vineyards, but crops?
No. I mean, they're so basically when you plant, the biggest thing that you're getting is the rootstock. And every stick that we plant is a grafted rootstock onto the European plant, whether it be Pinot Noir, whether it be Pinot Blanc, whether it be Seyval Blanc, whether it be something else. But there comes a time when if you decide, for example, that you have too much of one particular grape, you have the ability to field graft that vine over to something else, which saves a lot of time, a lot of money, and you get the benefit of getting the existing life of that rootstock that you planted. So that's sort of, I think, for us, what we're going to be doing over the next few years is doing some of that and just sort of rebalancing what we have planted in the vineyard as a result of a lot of changes to market conditions and stuff like that.
Well, we're going to go a little out of order, Shelley. We're going to talk about the Seasons Coeur d'Alene Wine Words of the Week.
Okay.
Field grafting.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain a little bit more in detail since you already brought it up? I'm like, this is perfect. Talk to us about field grafting.
Field grafting. So what it is amazing about plants is how adaptable they are. And I call field grafting almost like going Frankenstein on your plant. This is what happens when, say, you have one type of grape or something else planted, and you'd like to convert it into something else. Pretty much everything you'll see planted in a vineyard these days is an American-based rootstock, which goes under the ground, and then on grafted, and that comes up and produces all the fruit is going to be the European vine, which is all the things, it's basically the grapes that you would see making up any particular wine. If we, for example, say, hey, maybe we have too much of one type of grape planted and maybe we'd like to bring another type of grape into our operation, there are a couple of ways to do that. One would be to start from scratch and just plant on completely new land on your property. But that's really expensive. It will take, if it's a red grape, it'll take at least 5 years until you start to see any usable crop off of it. But on the other hand, we have another really fun option, which is that we can essentially take the existing vine that we might have too much of. We cut off the top of it. We keep the rootstock. We take a couple of cuttings of the vine that we would like to convert it to, just kind of jam it into where the wound is and tie it up and treat it. And literally by the following year, we will have a usable crop that will have the new grape in it.
That's amazing.
Do you use what's that powder called? Rooting powder when you do that?
It's a version of that. It's a little bit with an operation like a grapevine. It needs a little bit more than that, but there are a lot of similarities in what makes those things up. But really, if it's going into an already established rootstock as opposed to just the ground, it doesn't quite need as much stuff from a box, as I would say. Most of the stuff it needs is already in there. It just sort of has to take. And a lot of that, once you sort of get everything sealed, will take on its own.
Where are you putting that graft? You're putting it where you, so you have the vine, and then you have all the branches coming off the vine that are also still part of the vine. But that rootstock, how far down do you go with that graft?
Basically, where the head of the vine splits into two parts, you'll cut just below that. So you'll keep it. It might come a foot or so below the permanent wire at the very bottom.
Got it. Okay.
But you're keeping the vast majority of it.
It's just so fun. I mean, when I worked at a nursery, gosh, I want to say 100% of the fruit trees that came in. We're in North Idaho, so our zones are four except a little north, and it's getting down to 2.5. It's the growing season is so squished, and so almost all of the trees came in with solid rootstock, and then they graft them in. And I would think that they need to be somewhat compatible. I don't know, maybe not.
No, they would. I mean, the nice thing about grapevines, at least, and I couldn't speak to trees or any other thing, but they're all pretty compatible with each other when you're talking about grape rootstock and really any kind of grapevine. There are differences in the rootstock. They tend to be, for the most part, relatively minor, unless you've got certain very specific properties of your land. But for the most part, what we see is that the type of rootstock really doesn't matter. It's just sort of more you've got one type of grape and you've got another type of grape, and they know that nature knows what to do.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's just so much fun. So I have been yipping and yapping while I'm drinking, and I haven't really asked Dave about his story. So I'm going to pour a little bit more of the sparkler, which is fantastic. And then we're going to need to hear your story. And we would like to hear a little bit about this Seyval fruit.
Yeah. This is a grape. Seyval's a grape that for folks on the West Coast, they are almost certainly not going to have heard of it. It is a grape that we affectionately we call it a French hybrid. So it was developed in France. It was a crossbreed between two different varieties of a grape called Seyval, Sebel. Now, because under French law, neither of these are considered to be noble grapes, you aren't allowed to plant it in France. But in the United States, where it's found a home is primarily in the Finger Lakes in western New York. You'll find it on Long Island. You'll then goes down into Pennsylvania, up into Ohio, Michigan. So you'll see it in cooler weather climates, particularly in the East Coast and in the Midwest. And we came to Oregon from Ohio, so we saw a lot of it there. We know climatically it's a great match for the cooler, shorter growing season that the Willamette Valley has. And probably the best part of it is it's a grape that nobody else has. When we moved to this area back in 2012, we came because we love this area. We love Oregon wines. We love the Oregon wine industry. But what we see is that the industry has a very small number of grapes that it tends to focus on. And there are climatic reasons for that. I mean, there are the big reds, your Cabernets, your Merlots and things. Now, we can't grow those. So we just don't have the right growing season for it. But we do have the ability to do a lot more than we're currently doing. And so one of the things that we decided very early on was to focus on, of course, we're going to do Pinot Noir. We're going to do things that the Valley's known for, but we also wanted to bring in grapes like Seyval Blanc, proven winners in a cooler weather climate, and make some really fun wines that for a lot of folks, like I say, they will be completely unfamiliar with. It's a great way to differentiate what we do than what a lot of our competitors do in this area.
You said Seyval was so Missouri, I think, was growing.
You will find a lot of Seyval in Missouri.
Yeah.
Yes.
We had because Missouri Wine Month. Go figure. We found one winery that would send wines and want to talk about them. But at some point we're going to keep building this up because we want to give love to everywhere. And you know that there's a little bit of this false. I don't know. I think it's a falsehood. The noble grapes, okay, we're fine with those. That's all well and good, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily better. They've made a reputation for themselves based off of being noble in the European countries and stuff. But I mean, it's like, why can't we have some of these grapes, some like this, that really are off the beaten path and really are delicious?
Well, I always say the noble grapes have better PR, but if you really want the heart and the soul of what wine making is all about, find these grapes that for the most part are grapes that, at least in America, you're not going to hear a lot about. But I think we're all guilty of this in its own way. We think about something that doesn't have the sort of history that these traditional grapes do. And we kind of think, oh, well, there must be a substantive reason for that. When the reality is, it's a grape that hasn't been, it really just has not had enough exposure. We haven't seen enough of it planted. People seem to not want to educate others when it comes to wine stuff and new grapes. And it always drove us crazy because this seems to be, for us, one of the best parts about being in the wine business is learning new potential, outcomes and, finding just some fun little ways of expressing what a property can do. And, you just don't have to be limited by the same old all the time.
Yeah, that's true. I guess probably some people are afraid that it will fail and they wasted a few years or things like that.
And it's always possible, but as we just discussed, you can always field graft over it if it doesn't work into something else. So you don't have the kind of downsides that I think maybe a lot, and I agree with you that that's probably what a lot of folks think. But I think that there's also this idea that our customers are not going to be open to exploring new avenues, and it's been the exact opposite of my experience having a small winery. Is that a lot of people that come to me are coming to me specifically because we are doing things very differently than a lot of the larger producers are. And we're going to take some chances in doing that, but everything that we do has been studied, it's been analyzed. We've spent a lot of due diligence, time, and effort to really decide, what are the risks worth taking. And, if we've got a grape that is a proven winner in our climate and it's making great wines in other parts of the world in those similar climates, why would we not give it a chance?
Exactly. We are going to move on to wine number 2, which, again, a different grape than we are super familiar with. This is a Pinot Blanc, and this is a 2024 Bells Up Winery Rhapsody Pinot Blanc. Mm-hmm. But we've been talking about French Graff, French. We should talk about French Horn.
Yeah, we should.
Had I not had the day that I had today, I was going to almost throw Dave a curveball. You really packed these corks in here, Dave.
Quality control is most important.
That's right. We have a series called Wine is Like Music, and we've had a sax player, a jazz sax player, a guitar player, a jazz piano player, and recently a drummer. And what they do is they taste the wine and then they create what they're tasting. And
it's interesting because what I'm doing is almost that process in reverse.
Oh, that's interesting. Very interesting. It's I would love to try to maybe in a year for next year's Oregon Wine Month we have you on and we do a Wine is Like Music, maybe reversed or something. I don't know. It seems like we haven't had a French horn, that's for sure. Look at how clear this is. The Rhapsody Pinot Blanc.
It's not an instrument that gets a lot of play outside of orchestral circles, but I played horn for 20 years. And when I started when I was in 6th grade, my dad was a trombone player. I have a younger brother who's a trumpet player. And I played for 20 years all through college and a little bit after that. When I graduated, I had a chance at a professional performance career. I always tell people I did the really smart thing and did not pursue it. I've got a lot of very talented friends, and I know what a grind that life is, and I never wanted to lose my love of playing. But so I played for a little while semi-professionally after that, and I still have the horn. I just finding the time to play and practice is nearly impossible when you're a small business owner and a dad and a husband and all that. But when we started the winery, what we were thinking about was how do you get people to connect with the wines beyond kind of the traditional technical ways that we always talk about wines. I sit down and tell people, I can't tell you what you smell. I can't tell you what you taste. I don't have your palate. And even if I could tell you, I wouldn't want to, because the whole idea is you have to connect with the wines on your terms, with where you are. But what I can do is talk about how the wines make you feel. And really, it's on the palate, it's texture, it's mouthfeel. What is the story that it's telling you? And so, for example, so what we do, just kind of overall, is that each of our wines has a personality that we can tie to a specific piece of music, a composer. Just what is it that captures that feeling of what the wine is all about? So the sparkling that we did a minute ago was Joy, and that is for Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Ode to Joy, which is one piece that we know everybody's heard.
D minor, right?
Exactly.
Does that ever get resolved into a D major? Ever? Does it ever get resolved?
No. But then the one we have here, this is Rhapsody for Rhapsody in Blue. Now, this is the only other piece that, of all the ones that that we have on the sheet, I know we've all heard Rhapsody in Blue. It's jazzy, there's a lot of free formness to it, but at the same time, there's still a lot of structure and substance there. And what I always talk about with Pinot Blanc is it gives you that minerality and that fresh acidity. But stylistically, what I'm doing with this is trying not to make it too sharp. I want a creamy texture with this Pinot Blanc. I want that to just sort of spread that acid across the palate. So the fruit that you taste here will actually roll all the way onto the back palate and finish. So often we taste white wines that are just very acid forward, and that fruit just kind of stops. And you always kind of feel something's missing. And I want to kind of get through that and onto the back palate there. So it takes a little extra work in order to labor in order to get that done. But it's well worth it because it also makes this wine so much more versatile. It's a great sipper, but it's also one very, very easy to just grab lunch or dinner with and just throw it right with it. And you just have a nice little treat going with everything.
Hashtag choosing.
Cheers.
Oh, that one actually rang in the glass.
I get that. A lot of the whites with the acid, you only feel it on the side and the front.
But the back of the tongue is pulling that stuff back, and it's so rounded corners is what I'm getting from it. Very smooth, just rounded corners. I mean, there's no edges to this. This just kind of coats everything back. I wouldn't even say this is necessarily chewy by any stretch, but it's really good mouthfeel, you know.
And I think it's so important. It's really interesting because when I talk to a lot of red wine drinkers about, what is it about white wines that has sort of driven them away? And almost always it comes down to that biting acidity. You talked about this no corners idea, which I really, really like. It's the corners that drive folks away from a lot of white wines. It really limits how they will get used and how they'll get consumed. And in my mind, sort of the more approachable that we can take a wine like this and make it, we're just going to make more and more people happy in the process.
You're going to have your New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs, and you expect that from those wines, right? You don't need them in all your white wines, thoh.
No, not all of them.
and
this, Verdes,
Shelley, do you know what the alcohol is on this?
I do not. What is it?
12.4. Oh,
nice.
12.4.
That's awesome. We're appreciating the lower alcohol wines now too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're not. The nice thing about being in the Willamette Valley is that for the most part, we don't get the long growing seasons that you do in California or let's say Central Eastern Washington State. So we're going to develop enough sugars to get the job done, but we're not going to do. I've never had a white go above 13.5. Yeah. And as you saw on this one, 2024 was a really nice growing season, very temperate overall, not a lot of heat spikes. A couple in the early part of the season, but it really calmed down as we went through the year. So that gives us this really nice balance, exactly where we want to see on alcohols. If we're between 12.5 and 13 on a white, I'm perfectly happy.
So we're in May 9th. About a week ago, I was starting to see notifications from people in Red Mountain and Walla Walla that the vines are starting to send out shoots. How's that happening down there in your neck of the woods?
It's already been happening. We had bud break down here in the valley about the end of the first week, beginning of the second week of April, which is slightly early than usual, but not by a heck of a lot. But we've had a lot of warmer, drier weather here over the past couple of weeks, and everything is growing like gangbusters. So we are anticipating an earlier harvest this year, which, probably the middle part of September. Not atypical, although historically, this area is used to harvesting into the latter part of October. But, obviously climate change has made some things over the years, taken us out of some of the normal rhythms that we've got in here. And I think now the new normal is going to be, end of September is going to pretty much be the norm. And it can be plus or minus that, but that's probably what our base is going to be around.
And do you worry about hail and heavy rainstorms once you start getting the blossoms going and all that?
It can be an issue, certainly. And we do see hail once in a while, but normally when we see it, it's really, really small. I mean, pea-sized stuff. And really, yeah, I mean, and really when it's going to be most problematic is those couple of weeks right at bloom. And we could say that's going to be an issue for rain, and it's going to rain during bloom. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
But what we've seen also over the years is that even if we run into scenarios where fewer berries are going to get fertilized in bloom, it almost always works out in the end to where we don't lose a lot of yield in that process.
Nice.
I mean, we would need a pretty catastrophic event in order to make a significant dent in the yields for a particular vintage.
Well, I suggest we don't even talk about that right now. We don't even want to put that out into the universe. I know I kind of regret it once I said it. We're going to take a break, and I have promised multiple times to get Dave's story. When we come back,
you keep cutting him off.
I don't cut him off. We just get diverted. We pivot away. So Dave's going to tell us a little bit about his story. We kind of already teased it with the French horn, but I really want to know all of it. I've got so many questions that blend wine and music together. So we're going to get a rosé and a couple Pinots when we come back.
Welcome back to Wine Time Fridays, episode 264 on this May 9th, 2025.
But we're not having a 2025 wine. We're having a 2023 Bells Up Winery Prelude, or Prelude, if you're a Honda car. Prelude, rosé of Pinot Noir. With us is, we have Dave Specter with Bells Up Winery, the winemaker and farmer. We'll go ahead as I'm doing this.
That's pretty color.
It's fantastic. We're doing these in the big red wine glasses. So, oh my God, look at the color on this.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Well, my guess is this is on the skins a little bit.
Oh, a little bit, yeah. There's a lot of Pinot Noir based rosé that gets made in the Valley. The vast majority of it that we see tends to be very pale. There's almost a salmony pink color to it, and you taste it, and they tend to be very thin and very acidic, and that's usually a result of the fact that you just don't have a lot of contact between the skins and the juice. And when I ask other winemakers what their protocol is, I've heard 1 hour all the way up to about 12. My protocols are going to start at 24 to 36 hours, and they've gone as high as 48. I am looking at rosé perhaps a little differently than a lot of folks are, because for me, I want rosé to be a food usable wine if you want to use it that way, which means we've got to bring out more color, yes, but flavor more importantly. And you need to have that time to let that flavor come through the skins into the juice. We actually will give those skins a very light press to give it a little bit of backbone. And what it does is it just gives you so much more flavor that you will get. And I think for a lot of wineries, they think of rosé as a throwaway wine. Nah, this isn't that. We're using the same grapes that we use to make everything else that we do. We're just dedicating certain grapes to make this particular wine.
Yeah, this is not a white Zinfandel.
This is not.
No.
Bring that up. That's just, those are curse words. Hashtag cursing. Do you press these whole cluster?
No. So we destem everything that we do. And the reason for that is because one of the things that's very important to me is consistency of style as you go from one year to another. I have a national customer base. I mean, we're based in Oregon, but we ship wines to people all over the country. I've shipped wine to 48 of 50 states, and the only 2 I haven't shipped to are ones I'm not allowed to by law ship to. So, it's important for me when we meet somebody for the first time that when they place future orders with me, that they have a good understanding of stylistically what they're getting when they place orders. Because, you've got another vintage of wines that come out over time, and the weather's going to be different. So there are going to be some differences, but I don't want it to be ridiculously different. And what happens with whole cluster is that there are certain years where you would not want to do whole cluster. And I'll give you an example. In 2022, it was a wetter year. It was a cooler year here. And everybody in the vineyard had problems with mold and mildew. Now, these are problems that you can solve, and we did, but the upshot is you would not want to use whole cluster in those situations because you would not want the stems, which have some of that residue of the mold and mildew, to be involved in a larger part of the process. So you run into a problem when one year you're making it whole cluster, and then the next year you're not making it whole cluster, and then you can switch back. I think it just confuses people so much, and not having a good idea of what to expect, from the winery that they want to commit to. I would much rather my folks know every year that, yes, the vintage will tell a different story, but that's coming from the vintage, not because of the stylistic decisions that I'm making.
Shelley,
Smart.
what do confused customers never do?
They don't convert.
Yeah, funny how that works.
They don't buy, they don't convert. What is the music that goes with this?
So this is Les Preludes by Franz Liszt. Every piece that we have used in the wine to honor the piece to use to honor the wine is a piece that has a lot of really great French horns in it. So this is a piece that I played. Oh gosh, I played this, I think, in Youth Symphony 30 years ago. No, 35 years ago. Yikes. But a fun, light little piece, but there's a lot of oomph to this. I mean, Liszt is kind of known as a composer that makes, more on the string side, and the piano side tends to be a little bit lighter. But when he wanted to, he could add some oomph. And that's sort of one of the things that I wanted to really play off of with this particular wine, because I think a lot of expectations that folks have is that it's going to be way lighter than it is, or that it's going to be sugary sweeter. I mean, it is interesting. We always call sweet the S word in our business. But the thing is, it means two radically different things. There are, of course, as everybody knows, wines that will have some residual sugar by choice,
by design.
And that may or may not be a good thing, depending on what you're trying to do. But this, for something like a rosé, I don't think the rosé should have residual sugar. On the other hand, I do think rosé should show its fruity characteristics.
I know,
right? So so when we talk about sweet, we want to make sure that it's sweet coming from the fruit flavors that you're getting, and not from the actual residual sugar.
So do you keep the name, your names the same year after year? So this will be a Rhapsody next year.
This will be.
Yeah, so this has always been Prelude. This will always be Prelude. If we wanted to make a new wine, and we will be doing those things, but they will get a brand new name, and it will always be that. And just another example of, we want to make sure customers know that when they see Prelude on a label, they know exactly what they're getting.
And you're right. It will be different by the vintage, because the vintage has to have its say. But the style of it is not going to change. This is 13.2. So yay again. And what I am finding on this is that this wine, I put it in my mouth and it's really delicious. And then it kind of goes away. And just when I think it's gone, it ain't gone. Like, I'm going to revisit right back here. And that's so much fun. Gosh, that's fun.
It comes back as that sour cherry candy.
I wouldn't say it's a little tannic, or maybe I'm using that wrong. But there's something back there that's just kind of like, maybe it's not scratching my tongue, it's just massaging my tongue a little bit. I'm up with these things. I don't know. This is
Pinot is, as you know, is not a very tannic grape to begin with. It has that notoriously thin skin on it. I call it the diva of all grapes for that reason. I mean, you just have to handle it with the greatest of care. There will be some amount of tannins even on a rosé that'll come through. And we do lightly press the skins. So, if you're comparing this to other rosés out that are made in this area, I would have no doubt that it would be slightly more tannic than the other rosés would be. But I think that's important too, because that is what is going to give it that structure so that when you food pair this, it will be able to stand up to pretty much any. I've got people. they use this in so many different ways. I've got customers in Texas that pair this with their barbecue in the middle of the summer.
How cool is that?
Yeah, that
And
makes
it makes sense.
Yeah, we get a lot of people that buy this around the holidays because it goes so nicely with turkey and, kind of your traditional holiday meals. Hot dogs, hamburgers off the grill in the summer. It brings that, it's refreshing because of that fruit, but there's actual flavor there, I mean, it's not just something that is just so light that it completely disappears on you. And we just see so many rosés out there that do that. And I don't want this falling into that trap.
It's it is the trend of the lighter rosés. We call that Sangny.
Sangny, yeah.
Okay. Nothing against those. They are really still trending right now. Rosé is just, people are pouring rosé all day, every day, all year long, and that's fantastic. They have their place. Mm-hmm. And this has its place, and that's the beauty of wine. Yep. We've got so many different things to try, and it's what we really suggest strongly to our listeners. Go outside your box. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with pouring your Chardonnay or your Pinot Grigio every day or whatever you're going to do, your Cabernet, Rich Perry. There's nothing wrong with that, but try other things. By saying no to other things, you're just leaving those for us. And we don't want to be picked that way.
I have a lot of customers that are sort of can fall into those ruts. And a lot of times what I will tell them is that if they have a small independently owned wine shop near them, now not the big, massive, warehouse type places, but the small, more curated places, go in and talk to the people that work there and own that place because they curated every wine that's going to be in that shop. Talk about, hey, here are the things that I have liked in the past, but I'd like to explore some other, possibilities and establish that relationship. That's where they're going to have their best value, is helping you to open up your world and saying, okay, the characteristics of a wine that you like can also be found in some of these other wines that are out there.
That's so true. It's just so true. Mm-hmm. We had Claire Carver with Big Table Farm last week, and she said to say hello to you.
Aww. It is a real honor because Claire is a rock star in this field, and she has been so gracious to us, and I'm so appreciative and just over the moon. She's wonderful, and folks, when you come out to the Valley, come see us, but absolutely go see Claire too because she's amazing.
I was talking to your wife Sarah, setting this up. And I was like, Sarah, you need to be on this episode too. She's like, nope, Dave's going to. He'll be fine. It's like, okay. But she did share a story when you guys were at a wine event. And Claire, were sitting at the same table. And Claire walked over and said, well, I've been hearing about your wine. I would like to try a little bit of your wine. And that just meant, Sarah had such pride, I guess, when that happened. But it's so much fun when you have people that have reputations, and it doesn't mean, again, they're better or worse. It just means they've kind of helped elevate the exposure, I guess, to your neck of the woods. And then they kind of come together with you, I just think that's fun. And it is one for all for one sort of thing, I think.
Absolutely. And we're so lucky in the Valley. We've got a lot of really special people in this area. And Oregon is such a small part of the overall wine industry in the United States that while we certainly have commercial places, it's not the same feeling as it is, let's say, down in California. We really do see more of the rising tide lifting all boats approach to this industry, and having people like Claire who have been, out in the front and leading this and being such a big part of getting more people into the Valley in the first place is only, helped, people. It can only help, people
Right.
like me as we sort of move into that position ourselves. And there's a lot of mutual respect amongst the producers here. And I think that's one of the nice things when you're coming from a craft, and she's a craft producer too. So when you've got craft producers, they tend to speak the same language. There's the respect for the effort and the time and the work that went into that product. And so, there's a lot of support that, I think just when you've got the more commercialized part of the wine industry, you just won't see in the same way.
Well, that is a great way to transition into Symphony No. 1 in D major, not minor this time, from Gustav Mahler. Did I say that right?
You did.
Yay. We are keeping this juice on the skins a little longer. This is 20. Oh, my notes have skimmed right on by. The 2021 Bells Up Winery. This will be fun because with the next 3, we've got 21s, and 2 of them are Noirs. So, oh gosh, I'm excited about this.
Yes, are you finally going to let him tell the story?
Yes. This is what we're going to do.
Okay.
I'm going to show the bottle for those watching on YouTube, and then Dave, while we pour, is going to talk a little bit about his story with the exclamation point.
Their story.
Yeah, well, he's on. Sarah's not on. She opted not to, but probably theirs too. This is 2021 Bells Up Winery Titan Pinot Noir, and this you'll find at the winery for $46. By the way, that Rosé Pinot Noir, $32 at the winery.
It's a good price.
Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So one of the first things I always say is I am a recovering attorney. I spent 10 years as a tax lawyer living in Ohio, working primarily with corporate transactions, mergers, acquisitions, and things. And really, so one thing I always tell people is that my relationship with alcohol is much healthier now than it was in those days. But I got to a point in my career where I was really just exhausted and done. And Sarah and I had started making wine as a hobby in our basement in 2006. It's kind of hard to believe, but we're almost at the 20-year mark of that.
Yeah.
But what we started with the concept was, the thing that we've loved with wine is sort of how it's treated in Europe more than anything. And we fell in love with the table wines of France and Italy, where you just go out into the local villages and you go to the co-ops and they basically ask you, do you want red or white? And what you're getting is just some of the most delicious wine that you will ever have. And yet it is so free of pomp and circumstance. And we sat down trying to figure out, okay, why is that? I mean, it can't just be we're on vacation and this is great, but it's got to be more than that. And we came to think about it because it's craft production. It's small scale. These folks have been doing it for, it probably centuries in that village. And we started wondering, could we create something that felt that way? So, it was, of course, incredibly naive and silly, but that's sort of how it began. And I got hooked very quickly. I mean, the first wines we ever made were from those kits in a box. You can go and buy the 5 gallons of juice, and
you got to cut your teeth.
I always, well, it's funny. I always say I've had worse commercial wines than the stuff I made out of kits. I mean, I can certainly go that far. But they're incredibly helpful when you're just starting out, because most of us have not been around something that's actively fermenting. What are you supposed to be seeing and smelling and tasting? And you just learn, you do a couple of these and you just kind of learn the very basics, and then you're ready to go to real grapes. I became a member of a vintners club where we lived in Cincinnati. I was probably the youngest person in there by about 25 years. But around a lot of folks that have been doing this for a long time, they were able to get access to some, at least I would say, decent grapes from California. And that's when things really started to get out of control. But we never envisioned doing this professionally until we first visited the Willamette Valley in 2008. And we absolutely fell in. Now, at the time, there were about 300, 350 wineries, and now there are over 800. But we loved the small craft places. And we noticed that a lot of people that got into the business came from other career fields that maybe were a little more technical. You see a lot of doctors and chemists and, just this real more attention to detail businesses. Given where I was coming from, that something that, appealed to me. And so we came back from that trip and we were talking about it and saying, well, maybe. And then I'm sorry.
He's just
I was
like,
just
because
it's very funny. Well, maybe just.
Well, about a month after that trip, Sarah's, my wife's professional mentor, had just turned 40 and got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And at that time, we were about 5 years younger than her. And we were, coming up at this point in our lives where we had to make some decisions. And we, at that point, realized that life is just too short and to be miserable with what you were doing. And we made the decision that we were going to try to pursue this, understanding that this was going to be a process. You're not going to go from making wine in your basement to making professionally right away. So I quit my job, and for 4 years, I worked in the cellar of a little urban winery in Cincinnati, just to get the day-to-day commercial wine operations down. So we're until the point where we felt comfortable operating without a safety net. I worked with a wonderful gentleman who was a retired machinist, made all his own tools, and made about, he is volume wise, he made 3 times the amount of wine I do, but he did it in the basement of a 100-year-old Victorian building just in the neighborhood on the west side of Cincinnati.
Wow.
And he had a restaurant on the first floor. That was where most of his wines were sold through. And as humble as that was, he had been written up in multiple publications as one of the top 10 urban wineries in the United States.
Can I ask you a quick question about that? Where was he getting his fruit?
So a variety of sources. Most of his reds were actually coming from the same place in California where we were getting our grapes for our craft hobbies. But for whites, for the most part, he was getting them locally in Ohio, northeastern Ohio mostly, sometimes in the Finger Lakes in New York, which is a little bit longer, but it's still basically in that same direction. And then there were a couple of red grapes that he actually sourced locally in southwestern Ohio. So there are a lot of different places that he pulled grapes from. I want to say probably 15 or so different wines on his lineup. But of course, when you have a restaurant, then he's thinking, he has to have a lot of options to think about what different tastes are. But what's funny about the whole thing is that his love, more than anything else, was Pinot Noir. And he didn't make Pinot Noir. Because Pinot Noir grapes don't travel very well.
No,
and they're very thin-skinned and they break. And
he probably brought in some Burgundies for his restaurant, I would imagine.
Exactly. And Rhones.
Yeah. Oh, so you guys, what I was getting, you said you started with these kits to kind of cut your teeth. The buy-in isn't nearly as expensive when you're doing that.
As a winery.
Right? But you're learning. So I love the fact that you actually went hands-on day to day in a winery because, and by the way, you got paid for it. Maybe not for like the pay that you would charge per hour as a tax attorney.
I don't think.
Did you not get paid? Did you go and
I actually didn't get paid.
Well,
the experience though that I was getting was so much outweighed what he could have possibly paid me in that environment. And we were very lucky. We set our finances up to where we could afford to do that. So, I always say with this operation that we have, there has been a lot of planning involved. We are not rich by any means, but we have managed what we have as well as I think we possibly can. It's not I mean, let's face it, it is an expensive business to get started in. And so if you're going to be small and craft centric the way we are, you really have to minimize where you spend money. So that's why we have no employees. It's me and Sarah, and and that on a day-to-day basis, that's pretty much it. We have a crew that helps us with hand labor in the vineyard. We've got some consultants that work with us to do things like social media and some other things, but it's us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
How many cases did you say you're making a year?
Oh, about 600 or 700, depending on the year. And that's across all of our lines. So, what you'll see when you look at, on any one particular wine, we're not making a whole lot of any one particular wine. We're making, 40 cases of this, 80 cases of this, maybe 100 cases of something else. But for the most part, it's small amounts, and it's when it sells out, it sells out.
So I think it was Sarah that said when you built your, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when you built your facility, you built it to be able to produce more than the 600 or 700 cases.
That was the idea, because at the time we weren't 100% sure sort of where our top line production was going to go. And this was 2018, excuse me, I should say, prior to COVID. COVID changed a lot in this industry. It changed a lot of consumer buying behavior. It changed a lot of travel behavior. And what we discovered after that is that where we are in our production, our 600 to 700, is probably where we need to stay.
It's going to be your lane.
Because as you said earlier, you talked about when we started this, you won't find us in stores, and you're exactly right. We direct ship everything. We don't sell in stores. We don't sell in restaurants. Everything has to be through us. We love to talk to you. We love to help you, and we love to share our wines, but you got to reach out to us.
Yeah.
That's a great motto.
It's a scary one, but it's once it hits that tipping point, at that point, then you're good to go. And after, of course, this episode, you're going to get a slew of calls. And,
oh my goodness! Well, of course.
So we're going to take a little break on your story to talk about this Pinot. This is really delicious. I don't know.
Oh, thank you.
The color comes across.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Again, 13.8 on the alcohol in this. Am I reading that correctly?
That's right. That's right. 2021 was a really hot year in the Valley. This was the year where we had the heat dome, where 3 days with 115, 116, 117 degrees, with a few other 100-degree days scattered throughout the summer. So you will see on pretty much all of the 2021s slightly elevated alcohols, but fortunately only slightly. I have never made a Pinot over 14%. I fully intend to keep it that way. I think Pinots above 14% just get unbalanced, and you taste a lot of alcohol burn, and they're just not pretty.
Yeah, we like pretty Pinots. Hashtag pretty Pinots.
Yeah.
So media.
One of the things, I'm sorry.
I said, can you tell we're social media people?
So in talking about Titan, so one of the things that when folks are in the tasting room, I'm always sort of talking about is that I made it a mission very early on to make sure that every Pinot that I made was very different than every other Pinot that I made. We see this a lot where you'll go to a winery and they'll pour you 3 or 4 Pinots, and you'll walk out and kind of think, are we sure they didn't pour these from the same bottle? Because they seem so extraordinarily similar. And I realize that that's an easy thing to do. So let's make sure that when we're crafting these, that we can really create these differences. The way I do it is through what I call the shape of the wine. And it's kind of a variation of this idea of texture and mouthfeel. I am thinking about, as the wine is on your palate and moving across it, you are feeling different things internally. You're feeling the sensations, you're feeling increases in intensity, decreases in intensity. different parts of your palate being activated at different times, there's almost this path that the wine takes as it gets all the way through. And I wanted that path to be the same for this line every year, but different from every other wine that we make. So Titan, for example, has always been designed to roll like a wave across your palate. It will build in intensity as it reaches the center, and your max intensity will be on your mid palate. And then the real thing that makes this wine work is the long, slow decrescendo off the backside. Very long finish, but just very, very gradually fading away.
You know, we watch a lot of American Idol and The Voice, and the panel of judges notoriously will say, "You're singing great, but we need to see your eyes closed." If you are watching on YouTube, when you saw Dave describe that, his eyes were closed. He was in a different place. And as you were talking about that, Dave, I put that wine on my palate and really brought that in. And it's dorky to say, but it's magical. It's really fun. And I know this is like super geeking out on wine, but this is a part of the wine experience that if you give it a chance, you can participate in it, you know?
Absolutely. And you use the right word, fun. I mean, if you're not having fun doing this, you're doing it wrong. And, as I've always said, we are so used to thinking about, when you're geeky on wine, we're so used to thinking about that as being so overly technical. And, we're looking for these, ridiculous fruit flavors that I'm convinced don't exist most of the time. You're reading things off an internet site. When folks are here, I don't have any of the taste descriptors or aroma descriptors. It's like you tell me what you get out of this, because what I could tell you what I get, but it's irrelevant. I don't have your palate. Just let that hit you, let that happen. And that's where the geeky fun stuff comes in, because now you really get to see that intentionality behind what we're doing, right? You have to try to create this particular shape on the palate, and that, takes some work. Every year that process is slightly different. But at least we have an understanding every year of, okay, we know what we want this wine to feel like. And now we just have to craft it in such a way, and it's point by point. You're figuring out little bits and pieces, and you're taking one part this, one, and you're just kind of figuring it out.
It's so important to taste blackberries, taste raspberries.
But how many of us
have
actually gone out and tasted a violet flower?
Well, no, or lick the rock, right, down at Talos Creek.
Yeah.
Or Shelley will say, "This reminds me of catching frogs in Canada," because we all have our experiences, and that's what we have to draw on. And if that's all you have to draw on, that's all you're going to identify until you start trying other things. And to Shelley's point, are you really going to go taste a violet? Are you really, well, again, lick a rock?
And I have not had it overseas, so I don't know what that's like.
Yeah, but it's like the more
it's all based on your own experience.
Exactly. And good for you for letting people get to that point without kind of guiding them or putting the bumper rails on like a bowling alley,
Well, every individual's relationship with the wine is going to be way more important than my relationship with the wine. I mean, I've always used this example of where you make a piece of art, you put it up on a wall, you can bring 100 people in, and it will get interpreted 100 different ways,
maybe 100.
None of which are wrong.
Yeah.
And so I've always found it to be way more meaningful. When I'm describing the wine, initially, I mean, I talk about here's my intention, but when folks are going to sip it, I just shut up. at that point. I mean, it's time for me to get out of the way and let everybody form those individual connections with each of these individual wines, because those are things that will transfer. You know, when people take the wines home, those connections will still be made, you know, even if they're not sitting here. I think all of us have had those experiences of going to a winery and tasting something, and it tastes one way when you're in the tasting room, and then you take it home and you're like, no, this is not what I remember at all. If we can transfer that experience.
Sure.
And then you're pairing it with food too.
Right. But it's just the whole experience. Mm-hmm. It could be better. And maybe it's not what you thought, what you remembered.
Just different.
Different. It's so interesting.
How many Pinot Noirs do you make?
We're making 4 as of right now, and we can. I kind of can talk about all of them in these different shapes. We have one that I'll talk about the ones that we don't have in front of us first, since we are about to talk about Jupiter. There's one I make called Candide, which is the spicy, peppery version of Pinot. That's a fun one. That actually, it's interesting. That one tends to start at the tip of your tongue. It makes a big circle around, and it actually finishes back where it starts. So it's not linear the way the other ones are, right? So that's a fun one. There's another one we make called Maestro, which is our tribute to John Williams. And
interesting.
So I've wanted to honor John Williams for a long time, and I thought, how could you pick just one film score that he ever did? I mean, the man is still working on it all these years later. But every time that he's written something, the horns are always up at the top, just soaring over the rest of the orchestra. So that particular wine, you'll feel it way more on the upper palate. It's the brightest of the ones that we have. And you just kind of feel this arc across the top of the palate and then all the way through the back. So like I said, all have these very different, and you will know the minute you taste one, once you know what they are, you can't mistake one for another.
That's amazing how you describe them.
It's so cool.
It really is.
We just had the Gustav Mahlers. Now we're going to have the Gustav Holsts.
We are rolling with Gustavs here.
Yes, we are. I have to dump bucket. Sorry. We are now opening the 2021 Jupiter Pinot Noir.
Not the juniper.
Not the juniper, the Jupiter. Thank you. After Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's Symphony Number 41. And
so this is a 2-for-1, because you get Gustav Holst's The Planet Suite and the Mozart piece.
You could not separate them. They were both blended into this. Is that right?
Yes. And a lot of it is because Mozart fans have been bugging me for a long, long time to figure out how to get Mozart into the lineup, and this was the best way I could come up with.
That's nice.
Hopefully they're buying this wine to the edge of doing this. So this, you said, is a little got a little bit more weight.
A little bit more weight, but it's primarily because of the shape. So this one it starts the same way that Titan does. It starts low in the front. It builds in intensity as you get into the mid palate. But instead of Titan, which then comes back down from the midpoint, intensity-wise, this will rise all the way through the end and finish high and in the back palate. So just because of that, you're going to feel a little bit more intensity. It's also going to bring a little bit more juicy, savory characteristics. This is a wine that I'm imagining as a sort of crossover with a lot of food pairing options, where you got something with a little bit of rendered fat that'll go nicely with that savory note that you get with Jupiter.
Yeah, this
one's more fruity, I think. Mm-hmm.
I'm getting more Burgundian on this. No comment by in the room.
Whatever you say.
Yeah. Dang it, I'm wrong.
Like I said, there's no wrong answer. So
this reminds me a little bit more of a Burgundy. I'm getting a little bit more earthiness in this myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, our estate vineyard is on clay loam volcanic soils, and one of the big characteristics of these soils is a mushroomy, earthy quality to it. So, not surprised at all that you're pulling those notes off of it.
Do you have open tanks at all, like they do in Burgundy, or you're completely closed tanks?
No, we're completely closed.
No bugs in it.
You know what?
Yeah, we're clean freaks here. And one thing you'll probably see about these wines is that they're very clean.
Mm.
I think that's really important. Funky wines, I think I call them, they're academically interesting in that, hey, having a glass of one is pretty neat, but they're not something I want to have a bottle of. And so, yeah, way easier to sell something when you can sell a bottle of it as opposed to a glass of it.
It's kind of like those wines they age in the
Whiskey
bourbon barrels.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this is nice. Oh, maybe not.
It's not even a full glass. It's like maybe 2/3 of the glass, and you're like, okay, I'm done. I still have this whole bottle. And again, I think that's a trend. And people are like, this is great. And you know what? It's got this really interesting profile. But I'm sorry, about a half glass, I'm done.
Yeah, nothing's for everybody. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes, right? And we of course run into this all the time too at the winery. I figured as a winemaker, your goal is to put a bunch of just objectively well-made wines in front of people. You have no control over who is in the tasting room at that moment. You don't know what their preferences are. You don't know what their likes are. But if you put out things that you can look at and say, hey, they can tell this wine is well made, they'll have their favorites, and not every wine is going to be loved by everybody. But if they can, even in that situation, say, hey, it's not my thing, but dang, I can see this is a well-crafted wine. It's just not for me personally.
Sure.
That's a win. That's all you can do.
And by the way, that may not be for them that day. They come back the following year, and they may very well say, why didn't I walk away with a case of this last year? Mm-hmm. Because our palates evolve. We evolve. And, those that you use the word objective winemaking, if you can taste a wine or go into a tasting room without preconceived ideas of what you're going to taste and let it come to you, I think you're going to be ahead of the game,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you just don't know until you try it. And I think that folks start to learn the winemaking styles that they will like more often than not. And a lot of times you'll get into situations where winemakers will make wines for multiple people or for multiple labels. I don't do that. The only wine I make wine for is my own. But if you find a winemaker who does the style you like, I mean, just kind of follow that person's career and see who they're making wine for at that particular time, because winemakers change jobs a lot. So
that's so interesting.
Or they do make wine for multiple.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different models out there, and who's to say which one is the best? But kudos to you, because you have control over what you're making. And once you make it for somebody else, they're going to have different parameters that may be outside what you want to do. So, again, neither right or wrong. It's just another way, another model. But this way, you're making wine for you and Sarah and your followers. And as you grow, but sticking within your 600 or 700 cases, you may have to bump it to 800 or 900 cases at some point, but
well, we'll see. But growth can mean a lot of things, right? I mean, and I think for us, it's obviously the growth you can see growth in numbers, but I think you can also see growth in just the maturity of what these wines show year in, year out. And the maturity, I think, of understanding also what is too much for us, right? I mean, we've said as a small place, there are going to be a certain number of things that we are going to be very good at, but there are going to be a lot of things that we're not going to be able to be good at. And don't do those things. Don't get beyond
Do them.
what you can do well. Because with 800 wineries in the area, if your quality slips, if your customer service slips, if all the things that make you special start to slip, folks will find out about it pretty fast, and you will be in a lot of trouble very quickly.
I've just been kind of looking through the tasting notes of both the Jupiter and the Titan, and I find some interesting facts. So there's consistencies where these vines are being grown, and when they were picked. These are both 2021s, picked on September 12th. The harvest bricks on average for the Jupiter was 25. The harvest bricks on average for the Titan, which is in our glass right now, I think. No, it's the other way around. Yep. Was 24.4.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, but it is different. There is a difference of 0.6 of a point, right?
There is a difference. Now, could the difference be sampling error? There's a lot of things that go into it. I tend to look at what we see coming from the lab just within bands of things. I think we're always going to assume that, you're sampling on a day from a certain part of the tank, and there's a lot that can still change once you start to do stuff.
Sure.
But
can't really stir.
But so if you're within a particular range, I think that's where the consistency you start to see. But those are fairly high bricks numbers at harvest, and that's just and that's reflective of that hot year. Even picking as early as we did.
Normally 22 to 23 sort of thing, and
yeah, although I'll throw in a caveat with that, and that is that, again, with climate change, you're gonna start to see those bricks numbers, I'll say, creep up more than anything. I don't think you're seeing them jump off the page, but you will start to see those numbers creep up. And then another question is, when you harvest, what are you looking for when you harvest? Because a lot of every winemaker kind of has a different thing that they're trying, and for me, of course, I'm looking at numbers, I'm looking at the bricks numbers, I'm looking at acidity
on a daily basis.
But flavor is the most important thing. You can pick when the numbers are perfect and end up with underripe flavors, and with Pinot Noir, it won't hide any of those underripe flavors, and it'll be disgusting. So I think it's more important to wait. If it's an extra week, it's an extra week. It's got to be enough to get the flavors you're looking for. Let's get everything to be the right amount of ripeness, and then we can pick, and we'll figure out the alcohols later.
Now, both of these were bottled on December 5th, 2022, but one was released July 18th of 24. That was the Titan, and this one was released October 15th of 23. So I find it very interesting, the differences on these two, and you can taste differences of these two. It's just so much fun. So much fun. Yeah. All right, Shelley, we've come to our second break. When we come back, we are going to go to the big dog, do a little business, let Dave get back on his tractor, and move on. Welcome back to Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil and Dave Specter with Bells Up Winery. I saw this winery. I do my Google searches to find out, are there any Oregon wines we want to try? And Bells Up showed up. And I'm like, we have to have them on because we have the wine bell. Mm-hmm. So I am just thrilled beyond words that we have you guys on. I'm going to take this and put it in the dump bucket, and then we're going to open a Cabernet Sauvignon.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're doing that, maybe you could explain the derivation of your name, because we probably already sort of get it by now. But
I don't know. I think people that don't know the horn section in a symphony probably don't know that term.
Probably not.
No, exactly. So Bells Up has a very specific meaning for horn players, and I should say that when we were thinking about the character of what we wanted to do with this place, we sort of had all the musical ideas and everything down, and the idea of this, naming the wines after these pieces of music. But the last part of it was, what are you going to name the winery? And we said, well, when we find the property, we'll find some way to connect it with the theme. And it just so happens that we're located on Bell Road. So no, they did not name the road after us. I have to say that. No, we're not that cool. Apparently the Bell family has been living on this particular road for multiple generations, so it's named after them. But Bells Up has a very specific meaning for horn players. Most of the time when we're playing, the bell of the horn, which is where all the sound comes out, sits on our right leg, and we hold the horn. We put one hand inside the bell, then the other hand holds the other part of the instrument up. Hard to do on a podcast here, but so that's, for the most part, our bell is down on our leg, and that's 99.9% of the time what we look like. But every once in a while, you get a moment when the composer wants to throw in this little dramatic flourish, and there will be a little note in the horn part that'll say "bells up." And when you see that, as the horn players, if you imagine holding our horns, we pop the bell of our horn into the air, and this is our moment to play out loud and be the centers of attention for a little bit, right? So just it worked out absolutely perfectly. We couldn't have asked for anything better. Not to mention, it's a short name, it's a pronounceable name, and it's close enough to the front of the alphabet to where we appear early on lists, but we don't look desperate in the process.
I haven't got a double A.
Back in the Yellow Pages days, where you're like,
oh yeah,
a great winery, a great winery, just to get, this is fantastic. But yet you still have to think about these things.
It's so serendipitous.
It's so serendipitous. And doesn't that confirm your project here and this passion project, what you guys are doing?
You've got to get a few lucky breaks. Now, I mean, look, we busted our tails to put ourselves in the right position so that when that sort of opportunity pops up, we're there to take advantage of it. And if I'd say, if we're evidence of anything, it's, work hard, put yourself in the right position, and then when it does happen, something does happen, then you're there to take advantage of it, because otherwise all the breaks in the world aren't going to do you much good.
But
also, when you're drinking wine, you're sort of bells up in your glass too.
Exactly.
I was listening to a podcast this week, and they said, hard work ethic will create amazing luck for you.
Serendipitous moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's so true. Mm-hmm. And you work your butt off, and look what falls in your lap. And you didn't.
And everyone says, "Oh, you're an overnight success." You're an
overnight success. Yeah, we've been playing music for 15 years before we were an overnight success.
Yeah, it was like, if only it were that easy.
Right. The 2021 Bells Up Winery New World Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon, and this is not from Oregon.
Actually, it is from Oregon. Oh. It is just not from the Willamette Valley.
Oh.
Did I not see Walla Walla somewhere?
You saw the Walla Walla Valley, but the Walla Walla Valley extends into a tiny little bit of northeastern Oregon.
Oh, gosh. Sarah did not tell me that you were going to be this sly, Dave.
We got to keep you on your toes.
I love this. This is the best. Our friend Brad Binko with Eternal Wine has been in the Walla Walla Incubator Program, just graduated, and now is in Milton Freewater, just on the other side of the Washington-Oregon border.
Funny you should say that, because that's exactly where these grapes come from, Milton Freewater.
Right. Okay. See, serendipity works on our side.
Yep. So Milton Freewater is a really interesting place, and there are a couple of different landscapes that you'll see out there. What it's mostly known for is the valley floor, and there's an area called the Rocks District, which is essentially just a dried up ancient riverbed that was formed by Missoula floods. And so it kind of looks like Châteauneuf-du-Pape in France, where you just have river rocks and no soil at all. And the wines you tend to get from that area are very earthy, a lot of fun funk in that, but they're very big. They're very concentrated wines. And the issue that I run into is I'm in the Willamette Valley, and most of my customers are Pinot drinkers or just, kind of more elegant wines. So what I need is a vineyard that's going to give me kind of the softer side of some of these bigger red grapes. So the vineyard that we have been using since the very beginning is called Summit View. It sits at elevation up on the hill south of town, about 1,150 feet in elevation. And the benefit we get from there is during the day, we're going to get all the heat and everything we need. At night, there's nothing to trap the heat. Everything cools off. And the grapes kind of get a break. And what we see is, and I always say, like, imagine you harvest and your grapes look like raisins. You're going to get a big, concentrated, powerhouse. I want kind of more the velvet glove here. So I want something where the grapes actually look like grapes when we harvest them.
Yeah. It's so funny you said it's got a little funk.
You think Jared Funk of Seyval.
Richard and Jared Funk of Seyval, which they have a Syrah out of the rocks, if I'm not mistaken, which we had last week with Claire. And it's so funny. I just love how everyone works together. It makes me so happy. But that's and by the way, the alcohol in this is 14.3.
Oh, nice.
Wait, 14.7 maybe.
Ooh. Yeah, I think 14.7, I believe, is right. But notice under 15. And, for a lot of these big, heavy cabs, you run into 15 and a half of 16.
Look at the color on this. This is not as dark as you would. This is not a dark cab, in my opinion. Am I wrong about this?
You wait till you taste it.
I'm going to do that right now. We've already toasted. You've already tasted yours.
It's delicious. It could be lied down for quite a while, I think.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
But it's very good. Very
good. This you will not be able to purchase unless you're part of the Fanfare Club. Am I right about this?
You're right about that. Yes, that's one of our hooks to get people to join our wine club is that there are certain wines that we only sell to wine club members, and this is one of them because it is such a special and very unique wine.
How many cases do you make of this?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look, but it's 59. Probably going to be in the 70 range.
59.
Oh yeah, even less. Yep. It changes year to year based on yields, but yeah, it's never much.
Yeah, I mean, it's again one of the great things for wineries is to have a wine club because it kind of makes people, if they really like your wines, to step up to get some exclusive, unique things, special things. Yeah, it's like anybody on an email list. Special. That's right. You want to offer your email list something a little special, a little ahead of time, and that's like a wine club thing on this. This is, and we're not having steak tonight.
Maybe we'll have to go change our menu.
Yeah, but you don't need it with this.
No, but it won't go with the white fish we were going to have.
For the last 3 nights, we might just have to cook it and then have it on Sunday.
Give it to the dog.
No. What is wrong with you?
Our dog is fussy. She
is. What would you pair with this? I mean, look, I can say this would go with pizza, meatloaf, burgers. I think it would go with steak as well.
It would. No, I would agree with all those things. It would. And I would add that it also will go beautifully with blackberry cobbler.
Yes.
Shelley, do we
Which
have
you
pie?
We don't have any.
Dang,
The blackberries may bloom this year, so we'll see.
that would be nice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Get some-
see, and the thing about this that is very unique is that it has a much softer tannin structure, right? So this is not going to rip the enamel off your teeth. It's not going to dry out so much. And because of that, you get you still have the pepperiness that you expect in a cab, but the fruit comes through much better.
It does.
And there's still plenty of structure to keep it together, but it also means you can pair it with some of these dark berry desserts. And I always say, hey, you don't have to change your wine when you go to the dessert course. You just roll right into the next one.
Man, I like the way you're thinking.
Roll
Dave.
right.
Here's the thing on this. You say it's not so much tannins that's going to rip the enamel off your teeth. There are tannins on this.
It's young.
There are tannins, but they're soft tannins, but they're there. And
Mhm.
they're going to blend really well with some fun foods. And I like the idea of starting with dessert.
Starting with this. Not rolling into it. Life is so uncertain.
It's so uncertain. This is fantastic. How many vintages have you had of this Cab Sauv?
So the first vintage that we made was actually in 2020. We make Syrah from this same vineyard that we've been making since 2013, but the first year we did a cab was 2020.
It's opened up.
The only reason that this wine ever got made, and this is just one of those stories of things that happen. I think a lot of people will remember that in 2020, amongst all the other craziness that went on that year, we had unprecedented forest fires in the Willamette Valley
23 is a
that
great
caused
year.
caused a lot of problems with that vintage. Now, we were very unbelievably fortunate because we didn't see anywhere near the amount of smoke issues that a lot of our neighbors saw. But in real time, we didn't know that that was going to happen.
Sure.
And so we needed a backup plan, and we called the grower, and this was in like the second week of September. So you're not far from harvest anyway. And we basically said, do you have anything hanging you haven't sold yet? And he said, I got a little bit of Merlot and a little bit of Cab. And I said, all right, well, I'll take the Cab because it'll be easier to sell the Cab than it was going to be to sell the Merlot. I have no doubt both were going to be great, but it was only ever in
Sideways was still out there a little bit.
Sadly, the effect is real. It is.
I know.
I didn't do it. It just is. But so, then when we actually got it back and we started getting it in barrel, and we realized that this was so special, of a wine that is so different than anything else we've ever tasted out of a cab, especially as young as it is. I mean, this has the smooth tannin structure of a 10-year-old California cab. And we couldn't believe how elegant it was. And it just fit so well with what we were already making, both with the Syrah and the Pinots, that we kind of realized that, I guess we're going to have to make cab from now on too. So there you go.
This thing could be laid down for a good 10 or 15 years, right?
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. Now, not that I expect anybody to do that, but yes, it absolutely has that. It absolutely has that potential to it.
It's funny you said that you went to Washington to get some grapes, because this year, because of the freeze that was in Washington and Idaho, some of those people are going to Oregon to get some grapes around vintage.
Well, and what was a year ago, up in the Okanagan, they had those freezes. There's some tough look. What you guys are doing is farming, and Mother Nature is undefeated, and so you have to work with her or get stomped on. And so the good ones, the successful ones, are the ones that can pivot and open up some different avenues that they may not have wanted to do or thought about doing.
But they turned out good. And this is a great testament to that ideology of, you know what? Who knows what this could turn? Look what turned out. Good job. I would like to talk a little bit about some of the wines we have this week, some things coming up. And then before we let Dave go, we're going to pepper him with some questions. Okay.
not salt and pepper, just pepper. We've had the Daryl Rex Groom Reserve Chardonnay this week, Emerson Brown Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon, the Fernando Candelario Chardonnay, Matt Parrish Pilot Hill Gang Red Blend, the Long Shadows Julia's Dazzle, very nice rosé, and the Carmen Stevens Chenin Blanc. Yes, we're alcoholics here, Dave.
You say that as though it's a bad thing.
Well, by the way, because we recorded the last time was 2 weeks ago with Claire, and now that's a little bit more. But there you go. Some things coming up. Again, Oregon Wine Month as well as Aussie Wine Month. But the 17th of May is National Pinot Grigio Day. 21st is World Chardonnay Day, as well as the 23rd is International Chardonnay Day. Thank you, Rick Backus, for that. And something we really want to never let go is the 24th anniversary. It's not the 24th. The 24th is the anniversary of the Judgment of Paris. I believe it's the 49th. Because next year we're going to try to get Stag's Leap and Chateau Montelena. And wouldn't it be great if they sent us the 76s? Oh. Hey, one can hope. And of course,
I mean, I think they're over the hill, but
oh, you don't know that.
Not yet.
The 25th is National Wine Day, which Dave would agree with us is every day.
Every day.
We've got some things coming up. We have Highland, which is next week, Highland Estates. We've got Capri Vineyard, and as well as Andre Mack with Maison. How do you pronounce that? Is it Maison Noir Wines? I should get
probably
this.
Maison.
Yeah, before we
Maison, yes.
Before we get him on, we should probably get that down.
Yeah.
Very happy to have Andre Mack on. Been trying to get him on for 2 years, and it's all coming around. We forgot to say what this Cabernet music is. The New World Symphony, Symphony Number 9, in E minor, Opus 95. Am I right?
By Antonin Dvorak.
Antonin Dvorak. See the way I led him into making him say that? Yeah, it's not so easy. Okay, Dave, we are going to let you get on your tractor very shortly, but I want to ask you a couple quick questions.
Let's do it.
As a French horn player, are there any specific music pieces or composers that inspire your winemaking philosophy?
I think we just...
I guess so.
You've hit a few of them. We've hit a few of them already. As a horn player, one of the things that happens is there are certain composers that, like I say, primarily write for strings, which is fine. But even the composers that write for brass, sometimes the horns just kind of get forgotten about. We kind of get stuck in the middle, and, we're not loud enough to be trumpet players, and we're not, oompy enough to be tubists. And so when you get composers that really understand what the instrument is capable of, the two composers that to me just signify everything about what we look for as friends in the horn community is Mahler, who we've already talked about with the Titan Pinot earlier, and John Williams. I think everybody that's heard any of the John Williams, you really couldn't find a composition he's written that doesn't include an amazing amount of French horn right in front. Beautiful, mellow, just wonderfulness. So we just really look for opportunities to get recognized, I think, more than anything else.
Well, so what was the most difficult piece you ever had to play?
Oh, goodness. So, a lot of there's a lot of pieces, not even necessarily ones that we played in a symphony or in a band. We do solo work as well, and there's a piece that was written by Paul Dukas called Villanelle, and it's a duet for horn and piano. We actually have a library wine that we have done previously that I've named after Villanelle. It exposes every weakness you would have as a player. It is technically difficult. It challenges every bit of your range. And that's why he wrote it in the first place. you almost never hear this piece performed. It's one of those that, you know, only people in the community, the horn community, will know much about it. It's about a 7.5-minute piece, so people can go look it up on, you know, YouTube, Spotify, whatever. But it is incredibly challenging as a player. And frankly, it's a piece that beat me. I never really could get that one down.
Man. So the person that wrote our Wine Time Fridays intro and outro music, Todd Hornby, and we need to give him shout outs from time to time. I played with him multiple times at church, and he's a brilliant guitar player. We played at church a Bonnie Raitt tune, and he was playing the slide, and I just assumed he could play it no matter what. He's like, guys, give me a chance. This is Bonnie Raitt. I'm trying to learn. And at that point, I'm realizing, well, I don't sit down and play Ray Charles or Oscar Peterson, so I guess I should probably cut him a little slack, you know.
You know, part of what makes these artists great is that they take some things that are so complicated and they make it look so darn effortless.
Yeah, you're right about that.
And it's so easy to take that for granted.
Yeah, no fooling. But, you know, again, to your point about Shelley of the overnight success, it's not overnight success.
No.
It's working your butt off and committing hours upon hours to get this locked in to where you don't have to think about it anymore.
Are you done with your
Yeah.
questions?
I have one more. I just want to say a word. Zweigelt.
Zweigelt.
I
So-
had to ask it.
So this is an example of kind of where we think the future of our winery specifically, but I think also the area is going to go. We have planted on our property, in addition to the Seyval Blanc that we've talked about a little bit earlier, a couple of very obscure grapes. And I'll get to Zweigelt in a minute, but one that we planted in 2020, it's called Schioppettino. And that is Schioppetino.
Oh my goodness.
And it's going to get a musical name that people can spell and pronounce. Don't worry about it. But that is a grape that's grown in the far northeastern corner of Italy, in the foothills of the Alps, shorter growing season. Zweigelt is a red grape from Austria. Again, higher elevation, shorter growing season. You can see what we're looking at. We're taking our growing zone as it is, and we're saying, what are other grapes out there that come from climates that are very similar, that are proven winners, that can thrive and do well with the shorter growing seasons that we have here in the Willamette Valley, and plant just a little bit of some of these other, and bring a few, just some fun new wines out to the market. The Schioppettino I talked about before, that's going to be a really hard wine for people to find. Zweigelt, which is spelled ZW, but as my good Greek friend has taught me, it is pronounced TZ. So I kind of had to think about it a little differently. That at least is possible to find in your store. But, you know, one of the things about us is, because people come in and get to taste these wines, and we're not trying to sell them in supermarkets or shops that rely on people being able to read and pronounce labels, we get to talk about the story behind it, where it's from, why we're doing it, why it's so appropriate in this area, and why I think you'll probably see, you know, maybe not these two grapes specifically, but other similar types of grapes to diversify. I mean, we've had so much, we owe Pinot Noir so much in this area, but we're almost in a lot of ways victims of our own successes. You know, it's become everywhere. You see so much of it out there. And when you sit down and talk to our customers, the things that you hear are, we love your Pinot, don't ever stop making Pinot. Can we have a few more choices? And so that's where just frankly, just listening when people talk It makes perfect sense. And Zweigelt is the latest project. We field grafted that. We talked about that a little earlier. We will have a usable crop off of that in 2026.
Nice.
And then what happens from there with new grapes, I don't know. We'll see. We've had some thoughts, but one big project at a time.
Yes. So the Okanagan Valley is also growing some Zweigelt.
Mm-hmm. And again, same thing, right? Cooler growing season. I really just, I think people are just dying for these fun, different grapes.
Yes.
It's just really all about what you can teach folks about it.
I think if, and this is when we pour at large tasting events, when people ask us, just pour me your best. And we'll start. Well, is that your best? I don't know. You'll have to tell me, right? If you are able to pour in your tasting room, this sparkler's already back in the fridge, but the sparkler, which is the Seyval or the Pinot Blanc, and not say that's what it is, and just let them take it in, and then say if they like it or not. But if they like it, and then you tell them what it is, I've never heard of that. And so that now confirms it's okay to try new things. And so it expands their horizons, and broadens their horizons.
Yep.
So I love what you're doing. Bring in that Zweigelt. And we are just tickled pink. I am thinking this episode may be the record of length, and beating Lorene Betts.
Maybe.
Lorene Betts was with Mondavi for years, a friend of ours, and she almost went over 2 hours. I'm pretty sure this is going over 2 hours. We'll see. But Dave, thank you so much. I want to thank also our sponsors today, Pilgrim's Market and CDA Gourmet. With a little bit of knowledge, Shelley, my gosh. How about with a little bit of knowledge, wine becomes a lot less overwhelming. Dave, thank you so much. Continue doing what you're doing. We are going to come and we're going to knock on your door without an appointment someday.
No, we're going to make an appointment.
The appropriate appointment. Yeah. And we ask all of our listeners do the same. With a little bit of knowledge. With a little bit of knowledge, wine becomes a lot less overwhelming. Thank you for joining us, Dave. Thank you for being here. And we'll see you next week with Brett Miller with Highland Estates.
Hashtag Bells Up Moment.
Hashtag Bells Up Moment. Thank you for that.
Thank you for spending part of your day to wind down with Shelley and Phil. Remember, you can listen to any episode of the Wine Time Fridays podcast by visiting winetimefridays.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us on our Wine Time Fridays Facebook page, Instagram, or on Twitter, which is @VintageTweets, for daily conversation. Until next week, here's our toast to you. To health, wealth, abundance, gratitude, peace on earth, and of course, romance.
As an aside, this morning, I work downstairs, Shelley works upstairs, and she texts me, and I get the notification on my computer, and she says, the hummingbird's staring at me in the window. And so I'm like, okay, we'll make hummingbird food. And while we've been recording, it's been at the window staring. And I'm like, it's in the pot. I just have to put it in the bottle. Anyway, that's our wildlife here is, chickens,
oh my goodness,
and hummingbirds and squirrels that tease our dog.
Yeah, if it makes you feel any better, that's kind of what happens when people taste here too. We just get diverted and we talk about a million things.
Well, it
makes sense.
I only put the questions down there just in case we run dry, but it just doesn't usually happen, and that's the beauty of it, really.
Exactly. I mean, geez, if we get bored talking about wine, and we're in the wrong business to begin with, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. It's one of those things that's so easy to talk about.
It is, and I think everybody. My guess is that everybody you talk to, I mean, we're in this business for a variety of reasons, but when you get down to it, it's because we love this product and we love sharing what we're doing. And most of what we do is fairly unglamorous stuff. So when we get the opportunity to, actually, you know, uh, get talk about it with like-minded people, it's one of the reasons that we love doing the by appointment model so much, is that you're going to get people that just sort of, because they had to pick up the phone or send an email to make an appointment, they've done some degree of looking into who and what we are, and they really like that's what they're going to resonate with.
And they're not just there to get drunk.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're there.
And there are a million places you could go to do that. What people will always talk about is we're going to be the least snobby folks that you'll ever meet when it comes to wines. But at the same time, when you work hard on something, you just hope that everybody respects the effort that you put into it, right? And that's the nice thing. Again, the appointment model is just going to give you customers that are already sort of on that wavelength.
I think you're the first I've heard to do the appointment model.
I like it.
I haven't run into anybody else, but yeah, I like that idea too.